You wake before dawn, the house breathing soft and ordinary around you. Light slips through the blinds in thin gold lines, the kettle hisses in the kitchen, a neighbor's radio hums like a distant tide, everything familiar, everything safe. You are late 30s, practiced at holding the pieces steady, work emails answered between sips of coffee, a calendar that carries birthdays and dentist appointments, a steady hand for other people's emergencies. You are responsible. You are capable. You are exhausted by the ache that says there should be more. The message comes not as thunder but as a nudge, so gentle it could be mistaken for imagination. A memory of how you used to sketch logos between meetings, how neighbors once asked you to tutor their kids in algebra, the afternoons you fixed up bicycles for free. A thought arrives with the clarity of a sunrise: what if the small things you dismiss are not accidents but invitations? You rub the sleep from your eyes and tell yourself prosperity must look grand, a risky investment, a perfect plan, timing that aligns with the planets. That belief is comfortable, it lets you keep doing what you know. At the breakfast table, your partner notices the look on your face. You okay? They ask. You smile and say, just thinking. You say it aloud as if repetition can shrink the whisper. The kids shuffle by, uninterested, a cereal box spilling the ordinary soundtrack of life. Outside, the city moves on, commutes, coffee orders, ambitions practiced like rituals. Inside, the whisper returns, clearer now: that little talent you shelved as hobby, that kindness you offered without charge, could be the seed of something steady. Not overnight riches. Not a miracle. A small, steady channel where skill meets need. You shrug and reach for logic, bills, time, fear of failure. You file the thought away as a someday plan. Yet the nudge lingers, warm and patient, like a hand on your shoulder from someone who knows you better than you know yourself. There is wisdom in its simplicity: start with what you have. The day will ask you to choose between comfort and curiosity. If this stirs something inside you, stay with me, I'll show how a quiet gift can become both income and meaning. If this resonates, tap like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next step, where the signs grow louder and your excuses begin to falter. You wake to the smell of coffee and the soft clatter of the city taking shape, and for a moment the world seems ordinary: work emails, the kids' backpacks by the door, the habit of tying your life into neat, responsible knots. You move through the morning like someone on autopilot, folding lunches, checking calendars, solving problems for others with that calm patience people remark upon. At the office you straighten a colleague's proposal without thinking, smoothing numbers into a story they can sell. At home you teach a neighbor how to balance their books, drawing diagrams on a napkin like it's nothing. You do these things the way you breathe, natural, unremarked, unpaid. A whisper keeps arriving in small, stubborn ways. A billboard with a simple phrase, share your gift, flickers past your commute. A friend, over red wine, laughs and says, you should charge for that, and you smile the polite smile of someone who believes real earning requires spectacle, not quiet competence. One Sunday, a hymn slips a line into your chest: use what you've been given, and you feel the tug, like a hand on your shoulder you don't fully turn to acknowledge. At the local community center you run a free workshop because someone forgot to teach newcomers how to file taxes or write a resume. You stand in front of a whiteboard, and their faces are lit with relief, gratitude spilling out like light. Afterwards an older woman grips your hand and says, you changed my week. You nod, deflecting praise, saying, it was nothing. Inside you feel a strange ache, pride mixed with a quiet dismissal, as if calling it a gift would make it vanish. Doubt sits like fog: who am I to ask money for what comes easily? Fear counters: what if trying makes it fail? Habit wins most days. Yet the divine nudges do not shout, they persist. They show up in small textures of your life: a recurring phrase, an unexpected compliment, a jobless neighbor who pays you with homemade bread and tears of relief. The pattern is clear if you look: a talent used freely is a seed left on the table. If you're watching this and recognize that seed, stay with me. I promise you'll see, in the next scene, how a single brave experiment changes everything. If that promise matters to you, like this message and subscribe with the bell. There's more wisdom coming, and then follow as you take the first step toward turning what you already do into what sustains you. He wakes before dawn, long enough now to recognize the rhythm. The house breathes, the kettle clicks, and the same quiet nudge that has haunted the edges of his days hums louder than the refrigerator. On the counter, a stack of notes, recipes he's perfected, small sketches, emails where he helped a friend solve a stubborn problem, feel different today, like evidence arranged by some patient hand. He runs a thumb over the corner of a receipt with the name of a neighbor's business he once redesigned for free. The memory isn't proud or shameful, it's ordinary. It buzzes with possibility. At breakfast his sister says, half teasing, "You're always teaching people how to do things. Why not charge for it?" He laughs because laughter deflects, but the laugh has no joy, it's a thin shield against a deeper unease. Outside, the city moves in familiar patterns, construction crews, coffee carts, someone busking the same 3 chords, but his attention cleaves to small openings he used to ignore, a flyer for a community class, a post asking for help with a simple website, a neighbor posting a thank you for a handyman who fixed their leaky sink. Each is a soft tap from that persistent presence: what you have, you can give, and it will return. Later, at a late afternoon bench in a small park, an old friend slides into the seat beside him, eyes steady. "You ever think of charging for your time?" she asks. He answers with the rehearsed line, "I'm not ready, I don't want to bother people, it's not professional." She leans in. "Start small. Teach one person. Price it honestly. You'll learn more from the trying than from the planning." Her voice is simple, uncomplicated, an earthly echo of the message he's been resisting. The counsel settles around him like sunlight warming cold hands. He tries. A 30-minute lesson, a modest fee, nervy explanations, and fumbling tech. The first client leaves grateful and asks when the next session is. That night he sits at the kitchen table, the glow of his laptop a quiet altar, tallying emotions as much as numbers: embarrassment, thrill, relief. He has failed at confidence, succeeded at courage. The divine nudge doesn't roar, it keeps offering small, actionable invitations. If he answers, the work will be imperfect. If he refuses, it will remain only potential. Stay with me, because what happens when he refines that first awkward offer into a repeatable service changes everything. If this resonates, give this story a like and subscribe. In the next part, we'll walk through the exact, humble steps he used to turn that overlooked talent into steady income. The morning light slices through the blinds like an invitation. You sit at the kitchen table with a mug gone cold, a notebook open to lists of someday projects, things you do easily, almost reflexively, without thinking of money. You can picture the faces of neighbors you've patched up, the meals you've cooked for friends in crisis, the spreadsheets you've quietly organized for a church fundraiser. In your head those were favors, hobbies, an extension of who you are. Not a business. Not worthy of a price tag. A call from Anna, a steady voice you trust, pulls you out of the haze. "Stop waiting for permission," she says, as if she's reading the margins of your life aloud. "Charge $10. Charge $100. Test it. See what happens." Her words land like a stone in a calm pond, small, precise, and creating rings that reach places you've been trying to ignore. You mutter a half-laugh, embarrassed by how small the barrier is between what you already do and what you refuse to call work. You try. The first listing is clumsy, a post in a neighborhood group offering organizing help, small fee. 2 people respond. The first client hands you a crumpled 20 and apologizes for being awkward about money. You feel awkward, too. For an hour you fold, label, and reorder someone's life. When you leave, the client squeezes your hand and says through tears, "I don't know why I didn't ask before." That warm, human return feels like the first seed taking root. There's also failure. A workshop you schedule has 3 no-shows, and a payment processor eats a fee you hadn't expected. You stay up late recalculating prices, practicing a clearer explanation of your value. Each misstep instructs you. Each small success teaches you to ask, politely, confidently, for what your work is worth. And through it all, the nudges you once shrugged off grow quieter and firmer, a dream with repeated details, a scripture that won't leave your mind, the echo of Anna's steady counsel to iterate and persist. You begin to notice a pattern. Providence does not arrive as a thunderclap but as incremental openings that reward act after act. If this reaches you, if a forgotten talent surfaces in your chest, tap the heart below and subscribe with the bell. There's more. When you finally put a price on your quiet gifts, money will follow, but so will something harder to name. In the next moment, you will face the first real test of whether you can keep walking toward it. The morning after another restless night, you find yourself in the small kitchen again, sunlight slicing across the counter where you used to experiment with recipes for friends. The house is quiet except for the kettle, and in that hush the nudges you'd been ignoring feel less like whispers and more like a steady hand on your shoulder. You remember the afternoons you spent fixing neighbors' leaky faucets, the evenings you coached a struggling colleague through a presentation, simple acts you never tallied as work, only gestures of goodwill. Now those gestures hover in your mind like unfinished sentences. Start where you already are, a voice, soft, steadier than fear, says. It isn't thunderous. It's practical. Break it down, test it, don't wait for grand validation. You call Mara, the older woman who runs the community newsletter, and offer a paid workshop on public speaking. Her laugh is warm, surprised. You've done this for free for years, charge then. It's the first permission you've had from someone other than your own doubts. You set up a single 2-hour slot in a cramped church hall, photocopied flyers taped to the bulletin board, your laptop buzzing with a slides deck you made at midnight. The first attendee arrives expecting charity, she leaves curious and willing to pay more next time. One bad review follows, a moment of humiliation that tastes like metal, but you tweak the template, ask for feedback, stay curious rather than defensive. Each small adjustment is a tiny surrender of perfectionism and an act of faith. Money comes slowly, the kind of slow that teaches habits, pricing, contracts, follow-up emails typed with shaking hands. But something else arrives with it, confidence quieted into muscle memory, the sense that what you do has worth. A referral appears out of nowhere, a client mentions a cousin needing help. Providence meets effort in the ordinary cadence of persistence. If this resonates and you want to see how that single, overlooked talent becomes a steady source of income and purpose, tap like, your encouragement matters, and subscribe with the bell so you don't miss the next step, where the real tests of courage begin. He finds himself awake before dawn, light like a promise leaking through the blinds. The kitchen table is strewn with notebooks, a steaming mug forgotten, the ache between his shoulders familiar as an old friend. He remembers the whisper from months back, an invitation, not a demand, and tonight it feels less like an option and more like a direction. He breathes and opens one of the notebooks, sketches, lists, a half-written lesson plan for something he's always done for free. The penny drops with the clarity of a bell. These small, ordinary things are not accidents. They are seeds. The next weeks unfold in quiet scenes. He records a short video in the spare room, voice rough with nerves. He prices a simple service and almost talks himself out of it. A friend, steady and plain-spoken, sits across from him at a coffee shop and says, "You're treating talent like charity. Give it form, give it value." He replies, "But what if I fail?" The friend's hand taps the table. Then you reframe failure as feedback. God doesn't call us to perfection, He calls us to willingness. There are missteps, a first client cancels, a payment system that refuses to cooperate, nights of explaining a value he's never seen as commerce. There are small triumphs too, a text that says, "This helped me," a 3-star review that sparks humility and revision. In the margins of frustration he experiments, a lower price to attract users, a clearer outline to keep promises, a free mini-session to prove his worth. Each tiny test becomes a lesson. The divine nudge, once barely audible, grows confident, act in faith, then refine with skill. One evening, under a street lamp's thin halo, his phone buzzes. A payment arrives, modest, yes, but unmistakable. For a heartbeat everything is silent. He looks up at the sky as if to say thank you aloud, and a warmth spreads through him that has nothing to do with money. It is the knowledge that Providence met his effort. He now stands on a threshold, continue to tinker in private, or claim this as his path. If this moment lands with you, give it a like, acknowledge that small beginnings matter, and subscribe, ring the bell. Next we move from trial to structure, building the simple systems that turn a humble gift into sustainable prosperity. You sit at the kitchen table while rain threads down the window, a battered notebook open to a page of ideas you never thought could pay a bill. The lamp casts an intimate circle of light, and in that circle a quiet conversation happens, your own doubt on one shoulder, a steady, older voice on the other, the voice that has been whispering God's little nudges into the silence. Start with one person, it says. Charge something small. Learn from the first no as much as from the first yes. You laugh softly, the sound almost a release. What if they laugh, you ask aloud. The reply is patient. Then you'll know faster than if you keep saving it for a perfect someday. You test the edges of your courage. A social post offering a simple service, a handmade item offered for a modest price, an online session with a neighbor who's tired of procrastination, nothing dramatic, only real work dressed in the clothes of the gift you always called a hobby. The first response is cautious. A message reads, "I'll try it." Your hands tremble as you schedule the call. In the conversation that follows you hear gratitude, questions, a reflection of your own skill that you had minimized for years. The client's small transformation is proof that the work matters. Not everything goes smoothly. A mispriced product, a miscommunication, a moment of raw awkwardness when you realize you still don't know how to sell what you know. You adjust. You price differently. You ask for feedback. The wise voice guides you like a coach in the dark, iterate. Let providence meet your effort. Fail softly and keep moving. Each tiny recalibration is not humiliation but instruction. There is a cinematic moment, a late-night email with 3 words, "How much?" And your heart lifts because money simply arrived where intention met action. It is not an avalanche, it is a door opening. You feel meaning attaching to your bank deposits, and with it a steadying confidence that has nothing to do with luck and everything to do with obedience. If this touches something inside you, give it a sign, like, share the feeling, and subscribe with the bell so you don't miss the practical steps ahead. Tomorrow, that first payment will be more than a number, it will be a hinge. In the next scene, you will see what opens when you walk through it. The morning he decides to try, the apartment smells of coffee and paper. Light slips through blinds and draws bars across a kitchen table littered with sketches, a battered journal, and an open laptop with a shaky video recording paused at 10 seconds. He breathes, fingers steadying, and remembers the quiet prompt that has been nudging him for months. What you already do freely might be worth asking for. He speaks into the camera like he's speaking to one person, soft, simple instruction on a thing he's done 1,000 times for friends. He posts it with a shaky caption and waits. Responses are smaller than he hoped. One like. A confused comment. A client who asks for a discount. The old voices, fear, habit, the polite dismissal he grew up with, crowd the room, heavy as rain. He almost deletes everything. Then his phone buzzes, a message from Mara, the neighbor who patches roofs and gives impromptu advice at the mailbox. Start small. Charge for clarity, not perfection, she writes. Her words land like a steady hand on his shoulder. Later, in the quiet between washing dishes and answering emails, he hears the gentler voice he's come to recognize as guidance. Start again, iterate, let providence meet your effort. So he does. He tweaks the offer, packages 3 short lessons into a tiny paid mini-course, and writes a clear one-sentence promise, practical help that gets you unstuck today. He sets the price low enough that asking feels less like a gamble and more like testing. The first sale is not transformative, a modest payment and a message that reads simply, "This helped me." He reads it aloud, then closes his eyes and lets gratitude replace the old shame. Days become a rhythm of small experiments, better lighting on the videos, clearer captions, a 1-hour live where a nervous client asks a question that turns into a paid booking. Each misstep becomes a tweak, longer tutorial here, more empathy there. The apartment begins to feel like a workshop, a chapel of practice where talent is honored with pricing and patience. Confidence grows in inches, roots threading under the old doubt. If this feels familiar, promise yourself one thing: try the small offer. Like what moved you, subscribe for the coming steps, and ring the bell. There's more ahead where this first courage leads. Which talent have you never monetized? Sunlight slices through a small kitchen window, catching the steam rising from a mug as you fold a brochure in half and smooth the creased corner with a thumb that has always known how to steady things. You rehearse the words one more time: simple, honest, I can help you with this. Across from you, a first client, older and cautious, listens as if hearing more than the service you describe. There's a pause, a breath, then a smile that makes a knot in your chest untie. Money exchanges hands, a modest amount, and instead of the hollow relief you expected, a warm, steady current of meaning settles in your chest. This is what you were made to do. A friend calls, voice low and steady like the kind of counsel that has accompanied you in dreams. Start with what you already know, they say. Charge fairly. Learn from every misstep. You jot down a price, a promise, an imperfect delivery schedule. You discover the strange grace of iteration. The first session runs long, the second needs a template, the third is almost seamless. Each small payment is a vote of confidence, each piece of feedback a lamp that brightens the path. Doubt still taps at the window, but the tap is less urgent now. Habit loosens. Fear becomes negotiable. Neighbors ask what you're building, your voice grows clearer as you explain. A testimonial arrives in a message, short, honest, luminous, and you read it twice, feeling both astonished and undeniably alive. Money begins to follow not as a spectacle but as the logical byproduct of usefulness. You count more than dollars: the late-night reassurance to a worried client, the text that says "I slept through the night," the way your shoulders stop carrying the weight they once did. Purpose and profit move together, teaching you that prosperity is a steady series of small courages. If the thought of turning a quiet talent into dependable income stirred something in you, give this story a like. It matters more than you know. Subscribe and hit the bell to walk the next steps with me: practical prompts, honest pricing guides, and daily courage-building exercises that help Providence meet your effort. Ahead, we will test how to scale without losing the soul of what you offer, and the next moment asks you to choose again. You wake that morning to light slanting through blinds, gold like an answer. The studio smells of coffee and sawdust, your two hands' honest work, and the phone vibrates with a small, unmistakable sound, a notification of a paid booking. It is not a windfall, only enough to cover rent and buy that new set of varnish, but it lands like validation. For the first time, the thing you used to do for friends and for quiet joy shows up in your bank feed labeled, "Payment Received." Your chest loosens in a way prayer never quite did. You did it, the voice in the kitchen says, soft, familiar, neither demanding nor smug. You laugh, surprised at how steady you sound. "I just answered the email," you say, and the sentence feels both humble and huge. The wise counsel you've been hearing, the gentle, persistent urging that once felt like a nuisance, now reads like a plan: start small, iterate, keep faith in the tiny wins. You remember the nights of anxious hands and unfinished projects, the times you gave your talent away because you believed generosity and commerce were enemies. Tonight, generosity and commerce stand side by side on your workbench. Clients arrive like small miracles. One asks you to teach a weekend workshop, another hires a custom piece for a newborn. Each exchange is ordinary: a handshake, a message, a referral slipped into a conversation. Yet everything inside you shifts. Where fear used to grip, curiosity slips in. You catalog what worked and what failed, pricing poorly one week, over-delivering the next, learning that transparency sells as much as skill. The money is steady enough to change decisions, a repair becomes feasible, a dream hobby becomes a budget line, but more than that, a sense of purpose widens in your chest. You are building not just income but a life that aligns with the voice that nudged you awake. Still, habit is a patient stalker. Old doubts whisper their well-worn lines: is this enough? Will it last? There is a late-night call from someone who balks at the price, and suddenly the old script threatens to pull you back to anonymity. You tighten your jaw, breathe, and remember the counsel: iterate, not perfect. The doorway to real change is not only in earning the first dollar, it's in deciding to stand by what you make and ask for what it's worth. Tomorrow there will be a choice that tests that resolve, and when it comes, everything you've learned will demand an answer. The morning light finds you at the same small table where the idea first arrived, a chipped mug, a notebook full of scratched diagrams, an old skill you taught for free to friends. The room smells faintly of coffee and new possibility. You remember the first nudge as a whisper more than a thunderclap, a phrase caught on the radio, a stranger's offhand compliment, a verse that felt like an invitation. You resisted because resistance felt safer. Now you reach across the table and write the first price on a post-it, and your heart stutters in a way that feels like prayer. There is a short, steady conversation you replay in your head, the kind of counsel that changes trajectories. Start, the voice said, not an order, but an opening. Small, another answered, practical and kind. You test the waters, one client, one lesson, one handcrafted product sold to a neighbor who beams like you've given them gold. The first transaction arrives on your phone with a harmless vibration. It is small, but it feels enormous. You laugh, surprised at how much courage fits inside something so ordinary. The work itself becomes a liturgy. You show up, imperfect and steadily present. You fail, mess up an invoice, overbook, underprice, and you learn. Each correction is not punishment but tuition, a gentle teacher refining both craft and faith. Friends notice. Your partner watches as the worry in your face softens and is replaced by a quiet, radiant pride. Money begins to follow, yes, but more urgently, meaning blooms. The skill you thought trivial now feeds a household and a spirit. Outside, the world goes on, traffic, text messages, the usual small storms, but inside you carry a steadiness that no market can take away. You understand at last that Providence did not demand a miracle. It wanted your courage to meet its invitation. Which talent have you never monetized? Promise yourself one small step this week, offer that service, set a price, send that message. If this story has moved you, give it a like, that means something, a quiet nod to your own courage. Subscribe and tap the bell, here you'll find practical steps, wise counsel, and honest companionship for the journey ahead.